there, and welcome to this week's episode of Truffle Talks. I'm James Stephen, the editor of Truffle Report, and Truffle Talks is our new interview series where we sit down with the movers and shakers defining psychedelic business, policy reform, science, and culture. Joining us today is a very special guest, Dr. Bia Labate, founder and executive director of the Chacruna Institute of Psychedelic Medicines. As I'm sure many of you already know, Chacruna is devoted to producing and disseminating knowledge of psychedelic plant medicines with a particular focus on bridging the gaps between traditional use and modern science and making sure that important cultural and political conversations stay at the forefront of the space. Bia, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I've been following your guys' work, and I think you're doing a good job.
Well, thank you. So before we get really deep into everything, why don't you just tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself and your personal history with psychedelics as an anthropologist, and what drew you to try and to run a foundation the size of Chacruna, because it seems like a big project.
Yeah, we're good in that magical illusion trick. It seems like it's really big. I read in your questions like a big organization, but in fact, we're not. We're really small. We have a team of about 5 people, and I guess like 17.
5 very busy people then.
Very overworked and underpaid people.
Okay.
Yes. A few, maybe 17 contractors and about 70 volunteers. So it comes across as something very big and organized, but it's our Latin magic of always being used to working with little funding and doing a lot. But it's pretty small. I am an anthropologist. I have a Ph.D. from UNICAMP in Brazil, and I have dedicated my whole career to studying plant medicines, shamanism, ritual religion, and traditional uses of sacred plants, and the intersection between this and contemporary urban hybrid modalities. I've also turned my attention in the last 5 years or so more to social justice. And Chacruna has started off as a blog, a kind of a continuation of a blog I had in Mexico called Drogas, Política y Cultura. And then it morphed into an organization operating as a nonprofit, first fiscally sponsored. And since June 2019, we have our 501c3 status. And it's in many ways a continuation of my career and my studies. I have been writing and researching about these topics. My main focus have been traditional plants. Ayahuasca is the main one, but also peyote and other ones. And Chacruna started as publishing short articles from academics, following what we were doing in our blog in Mexico, anticipating conferences, publishing short articles. But then it grew to a bunch of other projects and committees and working groups.
So it began as something like a publisher.
Yes, I am mainly, I think that's kind of my main vocation. I am an editor above all. And I am I like to make this joke that psychedelics are not addictive, but studying psychedelics is addictive.
Very.
I have started doing books in 1997 was my first one when I started organizing. And I have published 24 books. I have promised several times that I will publish no more books. And then I slip and I end up doing a new book.
Oh no, I accidentally wrote another book. How could I do this?
It's a normally it's collection of articles. It's very organic. We have been doing like big conferences and organizing books out of the conferences. And I'm kind of a very team person. I like big projects with a lot of people. And so organize many books, many conferences. And then we have the chronicles. It's our publications online. And they kind of morph into books as well. And now we're translating them to Spanish and English and Portuguese. And so it's a lot going on. But yeah, Chacruna is.
And this is why I thought you were such a large organization, because I was aware of all, loosely of all these things happening. I thought, wow, Bia must have, 20, 30 people on staff pulling all this off.
Yeah, a lot of people think that we're a big organization, and that's kind of funny for us. Like big organizations like MAPS or Chacruna it's entirely different, the size. I would like to be a bigger organization. And if you're watching and you want to support us become a big organization, you're welcome to. But yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yep. All right. So let's get into the work then. I've seen recently your annual report released for January of 2022. Can you break down some of the activism, research, events, and initiatives that Chacruna is involved in at the moment, and anything from the organization's history that you're particularly proud of? I know that Truffle Report in the past has given particular attention to covering the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative, and we'd love to hear a bit more about how that's going.
Yeah, I have talked to journalist Ritka a few times. I think she's super competent, and happy to see her in our events. So we have in the front of publications, we published 2 books this year: Psychedelic Justice, which is a collection of articles of our website of the Chacruna Chronicles, and also we published Ayahuasca Healing and Science with Springer. That is a big, up-to-date, state-of-the-art on the healing potentials of ayahuasca. And then we have different committees and different working groups. So we have an ayahuasca community committee, and we continue to do our work on sexual abuse. And so we have these guides to raise awareness around sexual abuse, and we've translated it to a few languages and published more articles.
Can I just clarify for our viewers, that is sexual abuse by psychedelic guides that you were trying to raise awareness of?
Yes, in the context of underground or above ground ceremonies, there has been a lot of reporting on transgressions.
Yes.
So it's a lot meant towards women, but not only, and it happens super often, unfortunately, and we have been... Just
because of the level of vulnerability, you would say, during these ceremonies and practices that people experience?
All kinds of reasons, plus cultural challenges of people going to other countries and attending ceremonies in a foreign land that they don't understand. And a lot of people have histories of sexual trauma and their vulnerability. And there's also a lot of opportunistic folks. We have been publishing this in different languages and also publishing a series of resources that people can attend to. And in the front of ayahuasca, we also have been raising awareness around potential harms of the globalization of ayahuasca, including the commodification and the lack of respect to indigenous voices. And so that's one part of the work. And then we have a queer committee. This committee is dedicated now to organizing a book called Queer in Psychedelics.
Yep, we've done some reporting on that too. And how is that going? I'd be interested to read it.
Well, the book is ready, and we have delivered it to Synergetic Press, and we're waiting to publish it in December. I wish we could publish it sooner. It's maybe 35 articles. And we just published, continued materials and organized conversations around these topics. We have one upcoming this Wednesday on queer spirituality and psychedelics. And this book covers a range of different areas: spirituality, clinical trials, potential research questions, activism. We also are working on a book, Women and Uncovering Invisible Voices in the Field of Psychedelics. It's part of our series called Women in the History of Psychedelic Plant Medicines. We're also planning to publish a book with Synergetic Press. This is for 2023. And we're publishing a version of it in Spanish, coming out in mid-June. We're going to launch it in Mexico. And we continue promoting our racial justice things. And we have held a few workshops on racial bias in psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
And we also had a series on empowering therapists of color. And we published a bunch of influential pieces on racial issues, on asking the psychedelic community to commit to inclusion and diversity, and to pay speakers of color, and to be mindful on how to invite BIPOC folks to psychedelic conferences. Have launched a lot of resources for that. And in the legal front, we published a guide called Best Practices and Guide for Religious Freedom. So it's a resource for different psychedelic churches to better organize themselves legally and protect themselves.
And these are underground practitioners. These are people looking for legal exemptions, like the Santo Daime churches here in Canada. Who is this directed towards?
Yes, it's directed for people that have organizations and want to become churches, so that are practitioners that, if you say underground, you're kind of admitting that they are illegal, but we're making a case that they should be legal because they should be protected under Religious Freedom Restoration Act. But it's all kinds of tips on, should you go above ground, should you try to go above ground, how do you document religious sincerity, can you use one sacrament or multiple sacraments, how do you keep track of your sacrament, importation, distribution, should you have medical waivers, no medical waivers, insurance, liability. It's very technical. The idea is that a person could, like with this document, save a lot of money in lawyers, although ultimately they will still need a lawyer to incorporate and to adjust to local laws. But it's a resource to empower the plant medicine community to be self-sustainable and to protect themselves. But also with the idea of rights comes the idea of responsibilities. So you need to...
so I imagine that plays heavily into the awareness of practitioners in sexual abuse as well. With seeking that legal status and exemptions for above ground religion has to come a certain degree of consciousness that these people do exist in the community, and you have to protect yourselves and your parishioners, I guess, in this instance.
Yeah, we don't talk about too much about this on the guide, but the general spirit of the guide is exactly this. You need to have a really solid community. So you need to keep track of who your members are. Do they have beliefs? Is there preparation? Is there integration? Is there a kind of community that plays a role as a peer eyes into the behavior of everybody else? Is there a clear leadership? Is there a clear structure? And so all of this comes into being an organized and legitimate community. We give a lot of emphasis on explaining the legal rights and obligations, but for sure that is a very important aspect of the work. We also helped incubate this organization called Sacred Plant Alliance. They just got their status incorporated in California, and we call it SPA groups. It's I think about, I'm not sure, 15 churches now, and they do regular meetings and have developed all kinds of documents and training, for example, for an accountability process. If somebody transgress, what would happen and how would the community get a hold of it? So SPA is related to Chacruna, but it's autonomous and has its own, let's say, board of directors, and they're going to do the first appearance in our upcoming conference, Religion and Psychedelics, which we're having by the end of April, and a lot of our attention is geared towards that conference. So the conference is another end. We're very enthusiastic about our series, Patenting the Sacred. Ritika has reported on a few of those. And I believe we have done already 7 episodes or something. And it's different angles to the patent conversation. The last one was emphasis on racial issues. We had an indigenous elder, somebody that studies Ayurveda, another one that studies Chinese medicine, making parallels with alternative medicines. And we continue a lot also publication on issues of peyote, which is another topic of our expertise. And we've published a lot about conservation of plant medicines in general. It's hard to summarize because there's a lot of fronts. But the main idea is this one, creating the bridges between North and South, the English-speaking world and the non-English speaking world, the world of shamanism, ritual religion, indigenous people, and the emergent field of psychedelic science. And in Chacruna, we're dedicated to trying to rewrite the mainstream narrative of the field of psychedelics, trying to platform, empower, and give visibility to minorities, to folks that normally are marginalized from the conversation. So indigenous people, Black people, people from the global South, women, queer people, immigrants. Those are our stars, and those are our main. We do have also white male celebrities in our conferences or in our events and publications, but we try to find these new voices, and it's been very rewarding. We have seen that, people participating in our events change their careers, and they get a lot of visibility and a lot of opportunities, and we have feeling a lot of gratitude. It's a very modest, small organization, very grassroots. We have a patron system. We have about 500 members. And we don't have any kind of institutional support or mecenas. It's really our own.
You're independent.
Yeah, our own blood, sweat, and tears.
And Latin magic to make it seem bigger than it is.
Well, that's because we always, I'm Brazilian, and I lived and worked 8 years in Mexico, and both in Brazil and Mexico, we work a lot and don't get paid over hour. There's never funding for anything. Can you imagine what it is to be an anthropologist in, some non-developed country? It's very rough. And so we're used to working a lot and have to learn to fundraise better because the bills are very high, especially in the Bay Area where I live, the most expensive city in the United States.
Yeah. All right. So I actually want to talk a little bit more about that process of building bridges, because to me, the growth in interest around all things psychedelics seems like a bit of a mixed blessing for organizations like Chacruna. On the one hand, there's an increase of awareness, of interest. I think everyone is now becoming a lot more aware of the things these substances can do. But we're seeing that honest history and cultural conversations don't necessarily come with that. And, kudos to you guys for trying to make sure that they do. But with that awareness is also the potential for further exploitation. And how, what do you think of the balance there? How, there's, I just want your take on this. How are you trying to strike a balance?
Yeah, it's a really good question and a hard one. And advice, I accept advice from you and the listeners on how to strike that balance. And I have a lot of mixed feelings because, it's good to see more legitimacy. It's good to see clinical trials advancing, and it's good to see decriminalization, and it's good to see more and more people interested. But along with that, there's a lot of opportunism and a lot of people that are just there for the money, and a lot of naivete too, a lot of ignorance. A lot of people that are investing on psychedelics have never taken psychedelics.
Yes,
don't know potentially that psychedelics have potential adverse effects, and it's really not a panacea. And to develop a drug, it's complicated. It's not just, investing. It might take 10 years. You wanted to say something?
No, I was just going to say that, we've seen on that investing side where clinical trials happen and the results, for a psychedelic drug are good. And it's, most of these people are having positive experiences, but 10% don't. And that frightens people, but that's also to be expected for anyone who has any idea what psychedelics do to your mind. So
exactly, but a lot of people that are coming to this world don't know that. Mm-hmm. And there's also this tendency to just pump press releases with no news, like, pushy news that are not news. And a lot of people coming and a lot of people interested, and the amounts of like elected, I don't know the word, self-invented experts. Yes. Yeah. People that claim to be experts are people that put on their LinkedIn profile, for me, that have published all those books and done field work in the Amazon, in Mexico, in US, Europe. It's really, really frustrating. And also just the commerciality of everything. People throwing online events, that they take 5 minutes to invent and invite random people to speak. So it's very, very fast and very, very overwhelming. At the same time, it's happening. And as we say in Brazil, you have to learn to dance according to the music. So, if you're dancing rock and roll and they put a valse, you have to pay attention. I mean, it's a new era and you have to try to adapt and dialogue. So we really try to create these bridges because we don't want to alienate everybody. And we think there's a lot of misconception or ignorance or lack of knowledge. And potentially we want to talk to everybody, from the indigenous person without shoes in the middle of the forest, to the big venture capitalist with a startup pumping money. Chacruna is really about creating these bridges and listening to everybody and trying to raise awareness and create education and create community. And so we're extremely engaged in social justice. Our team is diverse and our patron membership is very diverse. I mean, it breaks my heart when I see our patron members, and there's a lot of marginalized folks that pay to be part of Chacruna. And for me, that's a great honor. It's a much big honor than to have, kudos from a researcher from Stanford or somewhere in Harvard.
When people who don't have much give a little, it means more.
Yes. And we feel, we receive dozens of messages of people that are touched by our work and that are inspired with our message, that are grateful because Chacruna today holds this pillar of integrity and ethical stance in the midst of everything that is happening. So I think it's very important that we keep these roots and that we keep resisting and we keep the nonprofit focus, because for us, psychedelic sacred plants, they come from certain lands and from certain people, certain traditions, certain histories, certain territories, and they are sacred and they deserve respect and they deserve to be honored and protected and treated with a lot of love. And where we are also engaged in social justice, but we're not identified with certain aspects of the pseudo social justice people that are just haters, weaponizing color or trashing people on Facebook. But that's not our style. Mm-hmm. Our style is real social justice with real actions, with real contributions, with real inclusion, with real content, because there's also a lot of people that are just criticizing all the time but do nothing. And so we try to balance all of this. We try to bring high academic excellency. We try to bring community. We try to bring awareness, education, social justice, but we are also keeping the fun, keeping it dynamic and enjoying ourselves, because also that's the root of everything, our love for plants. And that's why, some of us chose this exotic career, which doesn't have a lot of stability or benefits or protections. It's very grassroots. It's very modest, and it's really, really challenging. And you ask me, how do you strike this balance? I can tell you, every day I see something that I feel opportunistic, fake, and I find it upsetting and frustrating. But you have to focus on your contribution, because there's a lot of things that are wrong in the world. But everybody can do only so much. So we try to give our, focus on our particular contribution. And one of the ones that I'm more proud of is exactly this one that you started the conversation with, which is the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative of the Americas.
Thank you. I'd like to just also follow up and say, in the process of building these bridges and opening these dialogues and being open to communication, as you said, from everyone to the indigenous person in the rainforest with no shoes to the venture capital suits, do you feel that there is a danger of co-option by being co-opted by the business space? I want to go back to what you said as well about the volume of self-appointed psychedelics experts, and I may be guilty of this in some degree myself. I'm just going to own that here. As a journalist editor, I am I have done psychedelics. I was aware of psychedelics, but I am constantly learning. But yeah, the co-opting of authority in the space. How do you present yourself? How do you rise above the noise of the business space to prevent them from hogging the spotlight?
Well, I don't think you are self-appointed. From what I see, the Truffle Report seems to be doing some really serious journalism. And
well, thank you.
I think it's important that people that have been around for a long time, such as myself, 25 years of work, I just turned 50. We need to open the doors and accept a lot of people that are coming in, and nobody owns this. Nobody's owner of psychedelics, and the field is constantly changing. And I think there's space for a lot of people and multiple people. So it's important to welcome other people in. And I think expertise and authority is a relative thing, because it doesn't exist for always. It can be achieved. So I very much believe that if people work hard and are sincere and make their contribution, they start to become experts as well. And then they have their own voice. What I find frustrating is the things made up overnight, with people claiming more than they are. However, there's a lot of growth and a lot of really good things are happening as well. I think there's multiple wonderful initiatives and grassroots organizations like ourselves, and more media reporting, more education, more awareness all over the board. I kind of emphasized here the negative aspects because you were talking about it in this balance. But I do think that there is a lot of
things are being done right.
Yes, important initiatives, and everybody has an opportunity to do things in a nice way. Everybody can have a program of scholarships. Everybody can think of ways to giving back to indigenous people or to minorities or to small grassroots organizations like ourselves. Everybody can create programs that try to address some of the paradoxes. So we need more people, and we need more good people to steward this movement ahead.
All right. So I guess that brings me to my last question then. Truffle Report has tried to do our best, and it's as my project. The success or failure of that is on me, I suppose. But we also do admittedly, I'm based in Toronto. We do admittedly have a very North American bias, and I try to step outside that by having a diverse group of reporters covering issues from around the world. But I would like your opinion on what are we missing? What is the media as a whole missing? As an organization, what stories can we tell to paint a fuller picture?
Well, I think just the fact that you're asking this question is a nice thing and speaks well of you. Uh, you can connect to your local roots, and I'm sure if you put your genius mind into thinking about this and you put your resources of your
Genius mind, thank you.
Well, I'm trying to push here. I'm not. I don't know you enough, but put your energy that you do to create Truffle Report and put your energy into answering this question. It's all a matter of like balance, right? If you like something, you dedicate time, money, and energy. So it's up to you to put your energy to creating these answers yourself. I think there's probably a lot of wonderful initiatives, local indigenous communities, and Canada has a beautiful and rich history to be explored, has also a strong history in the field of psychedelics, because a lot of the early psychedelic research was done in Canada in the 50s and 60s.
At Weyburn Hospital in Saskatchewan specifically was the site of a lot of early LSD experimentation.
Yeah, there's a lot of, potential stories to be covered on this history. You can listen to your local indigenous voices, and you can create stories reporting on the paradoxes of mainstreaming, of commodification, globalization, medicalization. You can create a program for young journalists. You can support indigenous students and journalists that want to write for you. You can maybe support BIPOC authors by offering them better honorariums. You can hire reporters from the Global South. You can try to translate things that are published in other languages. You can try to donate part of your proceedings to organizations that you find interesting. You can help empower students in general, and keep an eye on what Chacruna is doing, report on the revolutionary stuff that we're putting out. And I think there's multiple ways that you can do to make this less gringo and more global. And it's up to you and your team. Like, you can create a little workshop of people in your team and come up together with a plan. And we're here to support and to help change this narrative. And I can tell you that it's incredibly rewarding. We feel incredibly blessed by all the achievements that we're doing. And I want to invite everybody that is watching to join our membership program and to donate to the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative of the Americas, which is our modest contribution towards Indigenous peoples, as we are all heirs in this movement of Indigenous people and traditional people. And there's much to be done. Also want to invite everybody that feels called to join this movement, because we do need a lot of good blood.
All right. I think that's a very strong place to end this. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this week's Truffle Talks. Once again, I'm James Stephen, the editor of Truffle Report, and this has been Bia Labate, Executive Director of Chacruna. You can find Truffle Report online at truffle.report, or as Truffle Report on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and LinkedIn, and Truffle_Report on Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. And finally, for any of you who enjoy the sound of my voice but can't stand my face, all of our Truffle Talks episodes are now available in audio-only format on Spotify. See you next week.